The wind slipped through the slats of the barn, whispering over brittle straw, past a child's unmoving foot, and into the hollow ribs of a woman who hadn't eaten in 3 days. The place smelled of rot and old hay. Somewhere in the rafters, a bird stirred. Below, huddled in the straw, the woman lay curled on her side like an animal too weak to run, her arms wrapped around the smallest of her 3 children. The others pressed against her, silent, unmoving except for the tremor in their limbs and the dry wheeze in their throats. Her dress was torn at the hem, stiff with dust and filth. One shoe was missing. Her lips were cracked. She closed her eyes tight against the wind, afraid it might carry her away if she loosened her grip on what little she had left. The youngest whimpered, mouth searching in vain beneath her blouse. She shifted her body, trying to offer comfort where there was nothing left to give. They had walked until her legs failed, until her shoes came apart and her skin bled through the soles. The wagon had burned a half-day's walk back, flames licking up what little food they'd saved. She hadn't looked when it caught. She hadn't needed to. What they were running from was already gone, and what they were running to didn't exist. The barn had offered cover from the wind, and little more. The old mule inside had snorted when she entered, but made no move to rise. He simply watched with cloudy eyes as she sank to the straw and gathered her children close. She had tried to sing that night, some soft tune from years ago, but her voice cracked too early, and the lullaby folded into sobs before the first verse ended. Outside, frost still clung to the grass where the sun hadn't touched. Dawn was coming slow and pale when the barn door creaked open again. Boots crunched over the dirt floor. Small ones. A child's. A little girl, no older than 9, stepped into the gloom with a dented tin bucket in hand. Her braid swung over one shoulder as she looked for the mule, her eyes still heavy with sleep. She didn't see the figure at first. Not until the mule huffed and shifted, drawing her attention. She stopped. A flicker of motion in the shadows. Eyes. Not the mule's. Someone else. The girl's breath caught. Her fingers tightened on the bucket. The woman didn't move, just watched, too weak to speak, too spent to rise. The children barely stirred. One let out a hoarse cough that rattled the silence. The girl stepped forward once, slowly. Then again. Her boots kicked straw. She squinted into the dark and saw not a threat, but something far worse. A mother with nothing left, bones under skin, dirt streaked across her cheeks like war paint. And those children, so still they could have been part of the straw themselves. The girl's eyes went wide. She turned and fled. The barn fell quiet again. When he came, his boots were heavy, deliberate. He moved like a man who knew how to kill, and had tried not to for a long time. The door swung open again, letting in the hard morning light. A figure blocked it. A tall man, shoulders broad, one arm resting stiffly in a sling across his chest, the other holding a shotgun like it weighed nothing. His face was lined, his jaw torn by a scar that looked old but unhealed. His eyes, though, were calm and watchful, the way a wolf's might be before it decides what to do with you. She looked up but didn't flinch, didn't beg, just tightened her grip around the smallest child and waited for whatever would come. The man stepped forward, slow. He scanned the scene, the sunken eyes, the dirty feet, the way the children didn't cry even though they should have. She had nothing, not even fear left. He stood over her, shotgun steady in one hand, but he didn't raise it. For a long moment, he just looked. Then he knelt, set the shotgun down. She blinked, confused, too tired for suspicion. He reached into the canvas bag, slung across his good shoulder, pulled out a sack, tossed it toward her. It hit the straw with a dull thump and rolled to her side. A crust of bread spilled out. Jerky. A small tin flask. She didn't say thank you, just clawed at the bread with shaking fingers, tore pieces for the children first, shoved them into their mouths, whispered to chew slowly, even though they didn't. He watched her feed them. The littlest child began to cry, not from pain, but from the taste of something real. The man didn't speak. He stood, lifted the shotgun again, and walked back out. The woman didn't follow, just sat there in the barn, the sack clutched in her lap, like a lifeline she hadn't expected. Later, when the sun warmed the edges of the frost and the wind softened to a breeze, the barn door creaked open once more. This time, two small figures appeared. The girl from before and another, smaller, round-faced child with her thumb tucked in her mouth. They stepped in together, holding hands. They didn't go all the way to her, just stood by the wall, watching. The older one, Sadie, set something on the floor. A small tin plate, a rag, a folded dress, worn but clean. She didn't say a word. The smaller one, June, whispered something only her sister heard. Sadie nodded. Then they turned and left. Inside the sack, beneath the bread, the woman found a hard-boiled egg and a small, sweet apple. She hadn't tasted fruit in months. She didn't eat it. Not yet. She held it in her hand for a long time, just feeling the smooth skin against her palm. That night, the stars came out early and cold. The wind died down, but the silence was thicker than before. The barn creaked and sighed like an old man settling into a hard chair. On the porch of the nearby cabin, a man sat with a lantern glowing beside him, his daughters curled against the sides, wrapped in blankets that smelled of smoke and pine. He didn't say much. He never did. Sadie spoke first. "She got kids, Pa. Like us." He didn't respond. June's voice came softer, almost a breath. "She needs a mama." The lantern flickered. Eli Boone sat still for a long time, staring out toward the dark shape of the barn. Sadie leaned her head on his chest. "Can she be ours?" He looked down at her, the way a man looks at something he doesn't know how to hold. His jaw worked once, but no words came. Out in the barn, the woman was brushing straw from the borrowed dress with her thin fingers, her children finally sleeping without shivering. And somewhere between the quiet of the barn and the silence of the porch, something small began to take root, something that hadn't had a name in years. The morning sun spilled through the barn's broken slats, turning dust into gold, but she didn't stir. The straw beneath her was warmer than it had been the night before, but only by a whisper. Her eyes opened slowly, sticky with sleep and grit, and she looked to her children, still sleeping, still breathing for now. At the edge of the barn, just inside the doorway, something lay folded on a flat board. A pale blue dress, warm but clean, draped over the edge like it had been waiting there all night. She stared at it for a long time, unsure if it was real. Then she rose, knees creaking, bones sharp under skin, and walked to it. She touched the cloth. Rough cotton, faint smell of lavender soap. She didn't ask who it had belonged to. She already knew. She stripped slowly, not for shame but for the ache of her limbs, and slipped the dress over her body. It hung loose around her shoulders, snug across the hips. The buttons didn't line up perfectly. Still, it felt like dignity. She didn't smile, but she didn't cry either. Outside, the ranch stirred. The old mule brayed once, indignant. The birds flitted through dry branches. Far off, a hammer struck metal, some neighbor fixing a gate. Her children slept through it all. By noon, the girls came again. Sadie carried bread under her coat, pressed flat, so it wouldn't show. June carried a jar of milk. Hands clutched so tight around it her knuckles had gone white. The woman, Lena, though no one knew it yet, waited for them near the stall, arms crossed. "No more," she said. Her voice, though hoarse, carried like something used to being quiet too long. "Don't sneak food. Not for me." The girls looked up at her, surprised. June blinked, already near tears. "I'll earn it," Lena said. "Go on now." She didn't wait to see if they obeyed. She turned and picked up a bent broom lying in the corner. The handle was cracked, the bristles half gone. Still she swept. Long, scraping motions, straw and dust clearing inch by inch. She didn't stop when her fingers blistered. By the third day, the barn floor shone like polished dirt. She mended the mule's tack with twine, patched holes in the boards, pulled burrs from the mule's flank, speaking gently to him, like she would a child. He let her. The girls returned, watching from the door. She gave them a nod. Not a smile. Not yet. But the nod was real. She was always moving now, always quiet. If she wept, she did it between beams, behind a hay pile. At night, she wrapped her children close and pressed her ear to their chests, just to feel something steady. The town noticed, not in words, but in looks. At the dry goods store, Sadie placed a tin of flour on the counter. The shopkeeper, A woman with too many rings and too little kindness frowned at her, eyes drifting past to the ragged hem of the child's dress. "That woman still in your barn?" she asked. Sadie didn't answer. The woman sniffed. "You be careful, girl. Folks who run from fire bring it with them." Another day, Eli Boone came to buy nails. The blacksmith paused mid-hammer. "Place ain't meant for that sort," he muttered. Eli said nothing, just counted the coins into his palm, slow and deliberate, as if silence were enough to end the conversation. It wasn't. "They say she's a whore," the smith added. "Or worse." Eli looked at him once. Just once. The blacksmith never said another word. Back at the ranch, Eli watched from a distance. From his porch, from behind the smoke of his pipe, through the windows, while pretending not to. He watched Lena carry water from the creek, watched her chop kindling with awkward hands. She wasn't strong, but she was relentless. She worked like she had no choice. He saw other things, too. The way she touched her children's hair, like they might vanish if she didn't. The way she tucked June's shawl tighter around her shoulders when the wind kicked up. The way she never took the biggest piece of bread. One afternoon, as the sun dropped low and the fence cast long shadows over the field, Sadie climbed too high. The top rail had rotted. It gave beneath her. The crack of wood. A scream. Lena ran barefoot through gravel and thorns. Blood bloomed where her feet struck earth. She found Sadie writhing, arm twisted wrong, face pale. The girl bit her lip until it bled. Lena didn't pause. She dropped to her knees, tore her skirt at the hem, tied it tight around the wound, talking low and calm. "Breathe, baby, breathe. Don't cry. Don't move." Eli appeared like smoke, sudden and silent. He took the child into his arms, Lena steadying her from the other side. Together, they carried her inside. The cabin was small but warm, wood stove crackling, the scent of stew hanging in the air. Lena had never crossed its threshold before. She stood just inside the door, unsure where to put her hands. Sadie whimpered from the cot. Eli wrapped her arm in a splint, movements careful but confident. When it was done, the girl fell into a half-sleep, fingers twitching. Lena stood there barefoot, blood on her shins, sweat on her brow. She turned to leave. "Stay," Eli said. He didn't look at her when he said it, just nodded toward the fire. She didn't argue. She sat down slowly, as if afraid the chair might vanish. The fire bathed her in warmth, in flickering orange. She hadn't felt heat like that in months. Her hands hovered over it, trembling. The room was quiet except for the pop of the logs. June curled in a blanket by the hearth. Sadie stirred but didn't wake. Eli moved in the background, silent, steady. Then he came to her side, set down a plate, a thick slice of bread, a sliver of meat, a boiled potato. No words. She looked at it, then up at him. "Thank you," she said. Her voice cracked on the second word. He nodded, once, and walked back to the window. She didn't eat right away. Just sat there, staring into the fire, the heat creeping into her bones, thawing something deeper than skin. It started with a crow. Just one, black as a burnt log, perched too still on the fence rail outside the barn. It didn't caw, didn't twitch, just stared through the slats like it knew something was coming. Lena saw it and felt her stomach tighten. The mule kicked once in its stall, uneasy. The children were playing in the dirt, drawing shapes with sticks, laughter soft and easy, unaware. But Lena stood frozen, hands wrapped in the hem of her skirt, her breath caught in her throat. The wind had shifted. The air tasted different, like copper and smoke. By sundown, the barn felt colder than it should have. Even the girls were quieter than usual. Lena stirred stew over the fire, her motions mechanical. Eli leaned against the porch post, watching the dark roll in like a tide. She told him everything that night. Her voice came slow, like drawing water from a deep well. She gave him her name, Lena Murdoch, and the one that used to follow it, Kale. He'd been charm and spitfire once, then turned to whiskey and rage. A man who smiled when he heard things. She told Eli how she'd fled in the dark, the wagon fire behind her, the children still crying as they ran. She told him what Kale would do if he found them. Not guesswork memory. Eli didn't flinch, just listened, eyes unreadable in the lantern glow. When she fell silent, he turned and walked into the cabin. She thought he might ask her to leave, but instead, he came back holding his rifle. He sat on the porch step, laid the rifle across his knees, and began to load it with one hand. Slow, steady, no words. The fire cracked once inside the house. The mule brayed again. By morning, it was already too late. The first horse crested the ridge at dawn, hooves thudding against hard-packed dirt. 3 more followed. Dust swirled behind them like a cloak. Lena saw the riders and froze mid-step, the wash basin slipping from her hands and crashing into the earth. Kale Murdoch rode front and center, tall in the saddle, his grin stretched wide and hungry. His coat flapped open to reveal twin pistols at his hips. His eyes scanned the ranch until they landed on her. "Lena," he called out, voice smooth as oil. "Didn't think you'd run this far." She didn't answer, just scooped up the girls, one under each arm, and rushed them inside the house. Her own children followed without question. The door slammed shut behind them. Outside, Eli stepped off the porch. The rifle hung loose in his one good hand, barrel low. He moved with a limp, like the weight of something long buried was pulling him toward the earth. Kale pulled up his horse, sneering down at him. "She's mine," he said, spitting the words like tobacco. Eli didn't blink. Not anymore. No more words. Gunfire shattered the morning. Chaos unfolded in seconds. One of Kale's men drew too fast and dropped to the ground with a bullet through his chest. Another fired wild and hit the porch beam. The third made it off his horse before Eli's rifle found his thigh, sending him howling to the dirt. Kale dismounted with a roar, firing both pistols, bullets chewing up the porch boards. Eli ducked behind a post, returned fire, then rolled to cover near the woodpile. Lena screamed from inside as a bullet shattered a window. The children huddled beneath the table, eyes wide, hands over ears. Eli took another shot. Kale fell back with a grunt, hit in the shoulder. Blood soaked his shirt as he staggered. One of his men tried to crawl away, dragging his leg, and was still. The air stank of gunpowder and sweat. The birds had all gone quiet. Eli stood, rifle empty. His shirt was torn and blood bloomed beneath it, just a graze, but deep enough to make him falter. Kale cursed and limped back toward his horse, his bravado leaking out with every drop of blood. He didn't look back at Lena. Didn't need to. He knew he'd lost. They rode off, broken and bleeding. Eli dropped to one knee. Lena rushed out barefoot, her skirt flapping behind her like smoke. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling but sure. His face was pale, jaw clenched. "Let me see," she said. He nodded once. She fetched a tin cup from the porch, filled it with water, and returned. Rain had begun to fall, soft as a hymn, soaking into the dust without sound. She tore a strip from her apron and dipped it into the cup, pressing it gently against his wound. His eyes met hers. For the first time, no wall stood between them. Not fear, not silence, just recognition, not of what they had lost, but of what they still were. Broken, breathing, worth saving. Inside, the children peeked from the doorway, eyes wide. June held her sister's hand. Eli's chest rose and fell, slow and shallow. Lena kept dabbing the wound, then let the cloth fall and rested her hand over his heart. The rain continued, washing away the blood, the dust, the memory of Kale Murdoch's sneer. That night, the house was quiet. Lena tucked June into bed first, brushing the girl's damp hair from her forehead. Then Sadie, who stared up at her with eyes too old for 9. Sadie didn't whisper this time. "Please," she said, her voice steady. "Be our mama." June, already half asleep, echoed softly, "Please." Lena looked down at them. These girls not hers, but somehow already carved into her bones. She didn't answer with words, just leaned down and kissed each of their foreheads, tears slipping free. Eli watched from the doorway, and for the first time since the fever took his wife, the house felt full again. The barn stood straighter now, its beams thick and new, its roof patched by hands that had once trembled from hunger. The old mule swayed inside its stall, chewing with lazy rhythm, straw rustling beneath it. The scent of clean wood and fresh hay hung in the air, replacing the rot that used to cling to every corner. Lena stepped back from the stall, wiped her hands on her apron, and looked at her work. The boards still bore splinters where her fingers had bled sanding them, but she didn't mind. There was pride in the pain, the kind that didn't sting. Behind the cabin, the earth had begun to answer her. Rows of tiny green shoots, no taller than a finger, pushed through cracked soil. She watered them at dawn and dusk, whispering to them like they were children learning to walk. Some mornings she caught June doing the same, coaxing beans from dirt with lullabies. The girls had stopped asking. Now they simply called her Ma. Sometimes she flinched when she heard it, not from hurt, but from wonder, like the name didn't quite belong to her, but had chosen her anyway. Eli never said much about it, but every time the girls called her that, he looked over just a little longer than usual, sometimes with a nod, sometimes just a breath held and then released. The days turned warm, the land stopped shivering, and life, like the seeds behind the cabin, reached for something softer. On the side of the house, beneath the windowsill where morning light always hit first, Lena took Eli's old pocket knife and carved into the wood. Eli, Lena, Sadie, June. She paused, blade hovering, then added 3 smaller names beneath, angled differently, like a whisper against the grain. Bo, Clara, Joe. Her children, lost not to death, but to silence. They had never spoken much after they'd run. Not about what they'd seen, not about what they remembered, but their names deserved a place here too, carved into something that stood upright. That evening, the sky melted into gold. The sun dipped behind the hills, leaving the world in shades of fire and ash. Eli walked slowly toward the barn, his limp a little less stiff than it used to be. He wore his old hat, brim low, hands in his pockets. He found Lena brushing the mule, her strokes calm, her humming quiet and tuneless. Near the fence, the children played with horseshoes, tossing them in lopsided arcs, cheering at every close miss. The wind carried their laughter to the barn like music no one dared write down. Eli stopped a few feet away, cleared his throat. Lena turned, one hand still on the mule's flank. He shifted his weight, looked down at the dirt. I ain't much with speeches. Lena smiled, slow and sure. Don't need one, she said, brushing hair from her face. Just stay. The words hung between them, light as dust in the last rays of sunlight. Eli nodded. He stepped forward, closer now, his shadow mingling with hers. He didn't touch her, just stood there, close enough to count her breaths if he wanted. Then he turned and walked back to the house. At the porch, he paused, reached for the door. This time, he didn't close it behind him. Inside, the hearth glowed. The floorboards creaked gently under his boots. He took off his hat, set it on the hook, and glanced back. Lena was still in the barn doorway, one hand resting on the frame. The children were walking toward her, dusty and smiling, asking if it was time to come in. She said yes, and they ran ahead of her. She followed slow, her eyes never leaving that open door. And for the first time since the fever took her, the door stayed open, not for escape, but for belonging.